A great way to understand diversity in the workplace and inclusivity stems from understanding culture and communication in general, and having that outlook on different cultures as well as your own, and that awareness of your own culture is very helpful in understanding others in your own country and those in the workplace that you work with. So that's why I want to discuss cross-cultural communication and some of the things that are underlying it. Today's workforce is more diverse than ever, as people from all walks of life now have access to opportunities and are coming into the workforce. We need to be more aware and prepared to help each other and support each other. And I think, having this cross-cultural communication understanding will help you understand those, especially those that may come from a different background or a country as your own. So, firstly, we know that communication is defined as the process of understanding and sharing meaning. Process and understanding and sharing meaning. And what that does and what that means is different from culture to culture. And you need to be aware of that. Because culture refers to the cumulative deposit of knowledge, experience, beliefs, values, attitudes, meanings, hierarchies, religion, notions of time, relations to space, concepts of the universe, truth, material objects and possessions, all from a group of people through the generations of time in individual and group striving. Now, if that's the definition of culture, think of all of your own versions of this. What are your experiences and knowledges and beliefs, values? What do you hold to be important and valuable to you? What is the hierarchies of your families and your relationships and your coworkers? What are your religions, and does it affect you and your decisions? All those things are how cultures are defined, and you have your own culture as well. Now, there are discussions about culture and its malleability. Does it change or is it stagnant? The optimistic version of cultural determination is that humans are infinitely malleable and can change and choose their ways of life that they prefer. That means that culture is also malleable and changes over time. Some situations can make it drastic and can change things, like war or other things can have effect on culture. But for the most part, aside from serious, dangerous events, it changes as malleable over time. But there's a pessimistic version or theory that people are conditioned to be this way, that they have no control. People are passive creatures and follow what they're told to do. I think it's a mix of both in some ways. People are wanting to follow others and be a part of the group, but not realize that they have their own determination to be what they want and how they want to be. And that life is malleable as much as culture and what you do and say matter, in the sense of, if you're part of something in a culture that's doing harm to others, you want to make that cultural argument, or you want to do something different that's helpful and inclusive, even if it's seemingly not what everyone's doing. That's hard to fathom, and there's a lot to unpack with that statement. But keep in mind, I think, there's a lot there for you to consider. There are culture relativism, where there's groupthink, cultural relativism versus absolutism. Let me say that. Cultural relativism is the belief that values and thoughts and beliefs are relative to one's culture. Absolutism is the belief that some cultures or some concepts of what's right from wrong is universal. So groupthink and being different from others, there's no standard to consider one's group as superior to another. So never think that. We hear times in our life that America is the best country that's ever existed. I think that's a dangerous, thing to be saying. There's nothing that says that my culture is superior to someone else's. There are things that we could, we're better at than others, and then vice versa, right? But that's just being childish. So studying differences in culture among groups and societies and learning that, when in Rome, do as the Romans do is important. And then know your line in the sand when things are wrong or things that you don't want to follow. And don't do that. That's okay too. Bribery, for example, in the United States is not okay. And in some cultures, that's normal for business. Don't do it. So I do believe there are universal values, and we should respect those norms. That's why we have the United Nations of Human Rights. Ethnocentrism, or ethnocentrism, is the belief in one's culture is superior to another. This convolutes or clouds your judgment in a way that's dangerous, not reflecting upon others' ways of doing things. It's dangerous in the sense of doing business abroad, where you're reduced at what my way of doing is fine and the other way doesn't matter, even though if it's against their norms or even worse, their values. And so remind yourself that just because it's done one way doesn't mean it can't be done another way, or that it's not okay, that it's somehow it's not okay to do it another way. That makes no sense. So be careful of your own biases in culture. So how do we know these things? How do we become aware of our own culture? Where does this all come from? There's values, the right from the wrongs, the things that people experience and that know that hurt them or that they liked or they found positive, become traditional things that become repeated in culture as rituals, that these are acceptable, these are things you can do. And then out of that comes heroes, the people we champion in society, even the, Batman and Robin and Superwoman, right? Or the Avenger characters, those are heroes. Those are the people we look up to. And that's not just heroes in that sense, but also like, teachers or leaders or whatever. And then there's symbols, how we value, our values are shared, that, we see that symbol, we know what that means to us, what that means to ourselves as a culture. So all that takes time. How do we measure this? Hofstede, I'm going to be very brief here, has measured culture and found ways and patterns that show cultures across different regions and parts of the world through different elements, and these patterns emerged into these 5 characteristics. Just keep in mind, it's not all-encompassing, and do not use this as a tool to help measure a market. Do not use this to judge or determine someone. Oh, that's how they are. That's just something. That's who that country is. It's what we should accept. This is a tool to help measure things, not to be conclusive and stereotypical, which is discriminatory. So be careful with using this as the tool that it is. But what is fascinating is some cultures are individualistic. They prioritize their own needs. Others prioritize the group or the clan. Masculine versus feminine societies. Some are more hierarchical and prefer masculine concepts of power and strength, versus women are not welcomed. It could also be feminism in the sense of kindness and different ways of doing things than men. Uncertainty avoidance. Some are risk takers, some are not risk takers. So when it's more uncertain, they are less likely to take risk. Power distance, how people look up to others. Is it a very flat culture where people are equal, or is there a group think where the power matters? Some cultures are hierarchical with a high power distance, yet are based on consensus decision making. Very interesting. Time perspective. Do some care about what's going on now or the present, or do those that care about time as what we're trying to grow our company for the future? And also indulgence, can they have restraints? Or is it like we have to buy the here and now? So the different terms to that. Each culture has their ratings. Like I said, be careful with how you use this and not to use it as a thing that everybody must be like this. But we see here, the United States in individualism ranks very high compared to a country like China, where they're very culturally group-oriented. You also have avoidance, where Brazilians are very much more risk-taking and enjoy risk versus even the Americans. We also have time perspectives. long-term versus short-term. You guys, it's very short-term. We're very much about what's going on, the next sales going on, the next family event. But, some people forget to plan their retirement. But in other cultures like China or in Germany, time matters, and they care about time in the long run. So those things could affect business deals greatly. They affect the structure of a business deal. Maybe we value short-term results, and if they value long-term growth, we can find a deal. Our differences of opinion can come together. These are not negative things. These are positive things if you look at it from a different perspective. So finally, a couple things on communication. Some cultures are very explicit. They say what they mean, and they mean what they say. Others say things in a way where you have to read between the lines in a way. I always caution on taking inferences or inferring into a conversation, because you're assuming something where the message doesn't assume that. So you need to be an expert on implicit communication of the culture and avoid it in explicit cultures. Let's take a look. Low context cultures like Germans and Scandinavians speak very clear and direct. What they're saying isn't ambiguous. North Americans, it gets a little mixed with French and English. But higher up on that is Latin Americans, the Arab-speaking world, and the Japanese, or parts of East Asia. They're very high context. They're not going to say things to you. They're going to give you an impression of something, and from there your answer lies. For example, if in Japan they don't want to say no directly, so they might go, that's going to be difficult. That's their way of saying no. And they didn't say no, but they meant no. So don't pressure that in a negative way. We're not going to go into that. Non-verbal communications matter too. I think it's fascinating. Your body language or the use of space. Kinesics, the sort of body movement and facial expression. Some cultures don't look in the eye. It doesn't mean that somebody's weaker or less strong. It's maybe seen as rude. Posture and gestures, if you're going like this, can be bad, because that's saying in Greece, the go to hell or something, Chromatics, color, color, power of red in China versus purple, what purple means to some cultures. Red means power, in American culture, where red is lucky in parts of Asian culture. It is a power thing, but it's also luck. White could be a positive thing for a wedding, but it could also mean death and funerals for another culture. So chromatics and colors do matter. Space. How do you feel about space? Some people like to be close, some like to be farther. How you feel in your personal space is culture. Sometimes we say, I like to think of it as a bubble, and your bubble, if someone's in your bubble, you want to step away. In America, we see that often with maybe some other culture where they like to be closer, and there's this like tango happening. That's just be mindful of that difference, and it's kind of interesting and fun. So, for example, in the Arab-speaking world, they speak parts of those cultures speak right to you, right directly. Very close, intimate conversations. That's normal. So keep that in mind. These are just fun things to understand culture, and hopefully be aware of your own and your own space, your own version of time, your own version of collectivism and risk, etc. So time, for example, can be some people like things done linearly. Some people like to do multiple things at once. That can be culturally driven and also personality driven. So just keep that in mind. I hope you had fun with this video. You get an idea that culture has many layers, has many manifestations, and it has many end versions. Whether you're versions of time, culture, risk, and etc. There's a lot there, and I want you to enjoy that and learn it, because it takes years to learn all this, and it's truly fascinating and a great way to make new friendships, new relationships, and impress others of your understanding of who they are, or wanting to understand who they are in business and your personal life.